Well, good evening. My name is Jake Udell with Larimer County Search and Rescue. Recently, we had a wilderness search for a subject on the autistic spectrum. We were informed the subject was afraid of dogs and might hide from searchers. For a wilderness search team, that hamstrung us right from the start. Fortunately, the subject was located in short order and without incident. However, this search raised the question with us: how can we better serve the autistic public? Now, this is not the first time that our SAR team has had to interact with individuals on the spectrum. I'm willing to bet at some point in your professional fields, paid or volunteer, many of you have been called upon to provide some form of aid to someone on the spectrum. In fact, I attended the last third Tuesday Mountain Rescue Association meeting, whose topic was on providing SAR for autistic individuals. The biggest point they hammered home was that it's not a matter of if you'll be responding for someone on the spectrum, but when. To help answer the question of how we can better serve the autistic public, we've asked an authority on the subject, CSU professor Dr. Temple Grandin, if she could come speak with us tonight, to which she has graciously agreed. I was going to write an introduction to Dr. Grandin, but I don't think I could do a better job than the brief bio on her website, templegrandin.com. It reads, Dr. Grandin did not talk until she was 3.5 years old. She was fortunate to get early speech therapy. Her teachers also taught her how to wait and take turns while playing board games. She was mainstreamed into a normal kindergarten at age 5. Oliver Sacks wrote in the foreword of Thinking in Pictures that her first book, Emergence, labeled autistic, was unprecedented because there had never been before an inside narrative of autism. Dr. Sacks profiled Dr. Grandin in his best-selling book, Anthropologist on Mars. Dr. Grandin became a prominent author and speaker on both autism and animal behavior. Today, she is a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She also has a successful career consulting on both livestock handling, equipment design, and animal welfare. She's been featured on NPR and a BBC special, The Woman Who Thinks Like a Cow. She has also appeared on national TV shows such as Larry King Live, 2020, 60 Minutes, Fox and Friends, and she has a 2010 TED Talk. Articles about Dr. Grandin have appeared in Time Magazine, New York Times, Discover Magazine, Forbes, and USA Today. HBO made an Emmy Award-winning movie about her life, and she was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2016. When she was young, she was considered weird and teased and bullied in high school. The only place she had her friends was activities where there was shared interests such as horses, electronics, or model rockets. Mr. Carlock, her science teacher, was an important mentor who encouraged her interest in science. When she had a new goal of becoming a scientist, she had a reason for studying. Today, half the cattle in the United States are handled in facilities that she has designed. A brief aside, I know I'm not the only parent of an autistic individual in the audience tonight. I'd like to say that Dr. Grandin's book, Thinking in Pictures, was and is a major inspiration for me. Dr. Grandin will give a short talk followed by questions and answers. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Temple Grandin.
It's great to be here. Also want to mention I'm a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. I've been there for 33 years, teach a class in livestock behavior. And yes, and both the Fort Morgan plant and the Greeley plant have my center track restrainer system. So you get a steak, there's a good chance it was handled in a piece of equipment that I designed. And the thing I want to talk about is autistic kids get scared. I used to be terrified of airplanes. I was in a very scary emergency landing when I was a senior in high school. And we had to go down the chutes. And I was a white knuckle flyer after that. And when the airliner put the landing gear down, I was sure the bottom of the plane was falling out of it. And the thing that helped me get over that was to make it interesting. and I had a chance to get in the cockpit of a big airplane flying Holstein heifers to Puerto Rico. This is back in the early 70s. And I got to see how the cargo department at the Miami airport, this is early 70s, mistreated aircrafts really badly. They still flew. Let cattle pee all over them until they had to drill holes in the bottom of the fuselage to let the cow pee out. Were really bad to a 707 airliner, hauling meat in it. And these planes still flew. But you take the thing the kid's scared of and make them interested. And one of the ways to prevent the kid from running away from someone who's trying to rescue them is to show kids in school that the dog is there to find them. They've done this with firefighters, get them all dressed up in the Scott Air Pack and have them come into the school because kids have hidden from the firefighter with all that equipment on and died in fires. You know, and explain why they wear the equipment. They wear the equipment because they can breathe. You see, knowledge about that, even let the kids try some of the stuff on. You see, and that makes it less scary. Oh, now I go on a plane and, we had a flight coming in from Portland, final approach, 10,000 feet, big black pillar appears, lightning in it. And I go, oh, he's deviating. And the plane started turning. I go, interesting. You know, you make it interesting. Because what I have to really worry about on safety is the car accidents on the way home from the airport. I got rear-ended by a black Jeep. But I think working with kids in the schools to show, that this dog is there trying to find them if they're lost. It's not out there to bite them. It's out there to find them. The firefighter has equipment on so that they can breathe. The other big thing with autistic kids, drowning is one of the #1 cause of death in autistic kids. We need to be encouraging them to learn how to swim so that that's not going to happen. Now, the problem let's talk about some of the problems with being autistic. Loud noises hurt my ears. So having all the sirens going and everything like that, that's just going to make the kid even more likely to go and hide. But when I was a little kid and a school bell rang, it hurt my ears. Now again, sometimes kids can be desensitized to some of those sounds. One dad took his kid down to the fire station and let him ring the fire alarm, the siren. Or turn the vacuum cleaner on. Turn on the thing that's scary. Because if the kid controlled the noise, like a hairdryer or the vacuum cleaner, then they got to tolerate it. A common problem with young autistic kids is just running off and hiding. They call it eloping. The other thing you got to realize about autism, there's a huge range in autism. You're going all the way from Einstein, who had no speech till age 3, Bill Gates, and a whole bunch of other famous people, probably had no speech delay, to somebody who has very severe autism, never learns to speak, and may have difficulty with things like getting dressed. And the problem with some of these kids is when they get upset, they can freeze. This has been a problem with when the police stop them in a traffic stop and they don't respond because they just freeze. They're like a computer on a really bad internet connection. And the more you press the buttons, the more it freezes. And so you've got to give them time to respond. The freezing can be a really bad problem. There was this bad case where an autistic guy was driving to work and he got stopped and he didn't respond right away and the policeman broke the car window. But in Texas, they're putting a special thing on the license called communication disorder. You could be deaf and not respond. There could be a variety of communication disorders. And that's why they didn't respond. So you have a nervous system that's much more sensitive to sensory input. The nervous system is like a slow processor. It takes time for them to process information. Now, the other thing about autistic people, a mildly autistic person might be a very best search and rescue person. I'm an extreme visual thinker, and that was shown in the movie. Everything I think about is a picture. So it was obvious to me when I started my research on cattle to look at what cattle were seeing. Other people thought, well, why would I get in a chute, see what cattle are seeing? I was on equipment startup 2 years ago at a big plant, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the cattle wouldn't go through the system, and a big shadow had appeared that I called the spider monster. And that would only be there for about a half an hour, but it really messed up the handling. So the kind of people that are extreme visual thinkers like me, they're also terrible at higher math, art, mechanics, animals, and photography, real visual things. Then you have another kind of mind, the mathematical mind. They're the ones that make all the computers, chemistry and physics, music and math, and then of course you get the word thinkers. the lawyers, the teachers. And one of the things about the word thinkers is they often overgeneralize. They'll talk about, well, we have to make the school more inclusive. But I'd rather talk about specific ways to make it more inclusive. And one of the big ones for a lot of people that have different minds is lighting. Some individuals can see flicker on LED lights. And you can actually find the bad lights by taking slow motion video. And I tell architects, that's the single most important thing we need to do for people with autism, dyslexia, also head injuries. People that have head injuries can often see flicker on fluorescent lights and LED lights. So you gotta find the LEDs that don't flicker. And you just photograph the room with your phone in regular slow motion, not super slow-mo. I actually have a new book, and I got a few copies out in the car, my new book on visual thinking, because I do a lot of talks to business leaders, and we need the different minds. I've been traveling all around. I've been on some very questionable elevators lately. They're taking forever to fix the escalators at the Denver airport. And part of the problem is they can't get the people to work on them. They're getting shunted into special ed. You know, we need these skills of these people that are different. I'll tell you right now, the piece of equipment that's running at the Greeley plant right now, and over at Cargill too, the guy who built the first one was autistic, undiagnosed, had his own shop. And then now they won't let kids in special ed take shop because of the insurance. I go, wait a minute. I worked with autistic people that owned the shops, and they might have had 20 patents. So that's just sort of a little introduction. And I think the best thing is I want to just get questions going. And as soon as I get the ice broken, I get one person asking a question, then I find the floodgates open. So if nobody has a question, I am going to pick somebody. That's how I found how to get the questions going and get the discussion going. But you're dealing with someone that has a nervous system that gets scared extremely easily, tends to freeze, and will tend to hide from you. I think we really have to be working in the schools on teaching kids that, you know, that, okay, different first responders are there to help them, you know, and why they do the things they do. Because I found making airplanes interesting instead of freaking out and I had a bolt of lightning at 10,000 feet beside me on an airliner. I go, oh, and then I feel the pilot turn the plane. Yeah, real unpredictable weather. Now, we had a good pilot. He said the weather was very unpredictable that night.
So I appreciate what you're saying about these, you know, early intervention.
Oh, the early intervention for autistic kids is super important. You got little kids that are not talking, don't park them on a phone and just let them zone out. They need to get into early intervention, like right now. You don't wait 2 years to get a diagnosis.
So I really appreciate that is critical, and I can understand why. But for us, we arrive at a situation where a child is, that we don't know.
Well, you don't know. That's the problem. And
they're already lost.
They're already lost. Now, some of the things you might try is you can talk to if the parents are around, well, what's his favorite music? What's his favorite cartoon character? And you might play his favorite music. This is a little thing that you can do. You know, the SpongeBob theme song or whatever it is that's his favorite thing that he plays over and over again, or a favorite movie. Have a favorite toy with you, things that are familiar. This can be helpful. But the music is a good thing because they can hear that from quite far away. So he hears the SpongeBob song or whatever, or the Disney movie, whatever it is, and you'd have to find that out from the parents. But that's something you could easily do.
How about with teenagers? What should we be asking the parents?
Can we have people asking questions come over to the microphone?
Oh, yeah, because we're recording. Okay, all right.
Oh,
Okay, let's just, I'm going to kind of repeat what the question was. The question was, you don't know these kids. And so I suggested find out from the parents what the favorite music was. And then another question that came up about early intervention. And, you know, if you have an autistic kid, it's so important to start working with them now. Doing nothing's the worst thing you can do. You can't get services, you've already got a diagnosis. No speech, rule out deafness, rule out surgically correctable stuff wrong with the throat or mouth, and get started. And you want, what do I want out of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old? I want speech, I want the ability to wait and take turns at games, and I want skills like dressing and brushing their teeth. That's what I want out of the little ones. And what I have found is a good teacher has the knack to get this out of this kid. And slow down when you talk to these kids. Slow way down. Because when the grown-ups talked fast, it went to blah, 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 blah. And if they talked more slowly, then I understood them. So that's what you want with, real little kids. Okay, let's use the mic so that the video can hear it.
So how about with adolescents or teenagers?
That have run off.
What should we be asking the parents or whoever is reporting that the child is missing? What are the things we need to know?
Well, you'd need to know maybe why he ran off. You see, now you have, there's different reasons why they might run off. You've got the type of autistic kid, often nonverbal, that just likes to run. He'll do something like run out in the middle of the street and take his clothes off. Or, something really inappropriate like that, and they just like to run away. Now, a teenager that's fully verbal, there might be some other reason why they're running off. Maybe there's strife going on in the family. So it might be an issue be more like just a regular family. Parents are fighting or whatever. And that's making them run off. Then if it's a fully verbal teenager, maybe he's trying to get to another relative's house and then get lost out in the woods. First thing I want to ask is a teenager fully verbal or nonverbal? See, nonverbal sometimes just like to run off and then they can't find their way back home. The other problem with some of the nonverbals is that their vision and their hearing is often distorted. The hearing might be like a bad cell phone, vision might be scrambling, like a buffering on the slow internet connection, and they will often smell and touch things because those senses actually still work. And if you want to get insight into the mind of a nonverbal autistic, you might want to read a book called How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? How can I talk if my lips don't move? And it's typed independently by a person who's nonverbal, who has difficulty controlling his movements. And there's another book called The Reason I Jump by an autistic boy that types independently. See, this is the more severe autism. We have a teenager, more like, me that might run off. I never ran off, but they might have a reason similar to a regular teenager running off. See, this is one of the problems you got with autism, is that it's so variable. You're putting the same label on Einstein that you're putting on somebody that may have epilepsy real bad, and then you've got the situation that are off their meds, which could be, if it's severe epilepsy, that could be life-threatening. This is stuff you need to find out from the parents. But then you might have one that just runs off because the family's fighting. And you might have a regular teenager that ran off. See, this is the problem you have. It's so variable. So I want to find out, when people ask me about problems in the classroom, I want to know age. Little kid, elementary school, high school, age, and then if they're older than 5 or 6 years old, can they talk? Do they have uncontrollable epilepsy or something like that? You see, these are things where to make suggestions on how to help them in the classroom, I've got to have some idea of things like, are they getting bullied in school? Is that a problem? That can be a big problem. There's a tendency to overgeneralize. I have teachers all the time say, well, how do I teach autistic kids? Well, I can give you a pretty much of a basic speech on the real little ones in early intervention, but when they get older, one of the big problems is bullying. And where I was not bullied was friends who shared interests. That's where these kids can get friends. I mean, it could be race cars. It could be, sports. It could be any different, all kinds of different stuff.
Thank you for your time this evening. I wanted to ask if you think it would be beneficial for us to have picture cards or picture books of things that we're trying to do for individuals who might not be able to communicate or nonverbal.
Well, if they're nonverbal, if they have, maybe they have a communication device they use. So your simplest communication device is a thing called picture exchange, where it's pictures. So you get up talk to the parent, and maybe you could get that communication device. So that you have, and some of the communication devices actually talk. So if the individual heard that, and there's a kind of robotic how they talk, but heard that voice, that communication device, that's something familiar. And then there's others that are fully verbal. See, this is the thing, you're dealing with something so variable. Now, the things that tend to be universal are the sensory oversensitivity, and the other problem, the tendency to freeze when you put pressure on them, and when they're at work, at a job, rapid multitasking is a problem. They have problems with following long strings of verbal instruction. So I always tell employers, we'll give them a pilot's checklist of how to clean the McDonald's ice cream machine and then reassemble it. Put that down in a pilot's checklist. You know, kind of an external working memory. But the more you can find out, well, you can take that communication device out with you. And you know, that's something familiar, and the you know, even a nonverbal adult hears that. So the more you know about them, the better.
Quick question coming back around to drowning incidents. So what is the attractiveness of water?
Well, they seem to be attracted to water. When I was a little kid, my sister and I used to like to play in the bathtub, and we'd take orange juice cans and just pour water back and forth. But there's kind of an attraction to water, and I learned how to swim at a very young age. But the thing we need to be sort of there's two ways to deal with this. How we deal with when you're actually out doing the search and rescue, and how can we have some programs in the schools and things in the schools to encourage parents to teach their kids how to swim. And then they're not going to drown if they know how to swim. And teach kids if they get lost that, you know, the different, police, search and rescue, firefighters, different people, they're there to help you when you're in trouble. You know, I could see when I was a little kid, I was terrified of a girl that was a few grades ahead of me dressed up in a ghost in a bed sheet. I was just terrified of her. All she did was have a bed sheet and was tied around her neck and 2 holes for her eyes, and I was terrified of her. That's kind of silly, and I actually remember it really well. These kids get scared much more easily than regular kids.
We typically don't want family members coming out in the woods with us.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But in this kind of a situation, should we be rethinking that?
I think it needs to be rethought in a lot of cases. If they could be brought out there without it being dangerous, or at least the family member could sit in a car and talk over the radio, and could talk to the kid over the radio. Let's get creative here. There's no danger there, because that might help. I mean, there's some situations it'd be too dangerous to have family members with you, but there's other situations where it wouldn't be. See, this is a kid that's like a frightened animal. They get frozen with fear. And anything you can do for familiarity, like hearing their mother's voice, hearing their teacher's voice. Now, I realize that some places you get out in the woods and radios might not work.
Thank you for that. And another question, in looking for people, we expect them to holler back when we call out.
An autistic kid may not do that. They may not do that. They tend to freeze. You see, most regular people, yeah, they'd be hollering back, help me. They see a plane going overhead, they'd be waving their shirt because they'd want to get rescued.
Thank you very much.
But the autistic kid gets really kind of frozen with fear. Their nervous system, it's like the fear circuits in the brain are ramped up more than most people.
Kind of along the same lines, when we're out searching, a lot of times it might be at night.
Yeah.
We'll have headlights, we'll be yelling, we'll have horns, whistles. If it's daytime, we'll be in bright orange. Are any of those triggers?
Well, you see, it depends upon what orange is associated with. Maybe if we gave the kid one of those T-shirts, then he's not going to be afraid of it. You see, this gets into the prevention it's just like the firefighter coming in and letting kids try on the mask for the Scott air pack. Then they're not going to run away from it because it's no longer something scary. Learn more about how search and rescue dogs work. You know, you show them videos, and you know why you do the things that you do. But getting out there with, but you're dealing with a person that doesn't have, that may not have the normal responses to holler back, or aircraft are going overhead. I'm out there, I'm gonna be waving something that he could see. I'd want that aircraft to find me, or that helicopter, whatever it was, because I know it would be out there looking for me. But the autistic kid may hide, or autistic adult may hide.
Kind of along the same lines, I'm a dog handler, and sometime, usually when my dog is searching, I've got bells on him, so I can help hear where he is. And at night, I've also got a light-up harness. But this is sounding to me all like a lot
But the
more
problem is,
sensory things.
this gets back to something in schools. Why does the dog have bells on it? Why does it have a light-up harness? So you know where it is. See, this is where I think we need to be making a really good video, because obviously everybody can't go to all the schools. But a really good video of why you do what you do with the dog. In other words, make it interesting. Oh, you can even buy those bells on Amazon. Isn't that cool? But you see, that's stuff that reduces the fear factor.
So along in with that, like if we did a presentation or a video or something like that, some of the dogs also, when they find the person, they bark right at the person.
And that's going to be scary.
Right.
And that's going to be scary.
And you know, kind of along Jake's statement.
You know,
about
where your
how-
dogs that sniff stuff at the airport, they just sit down. You know, they say if they smell something in your briefcase they don't think should be there, but that's what the dogs that smell for meat coming in from other countries and the bag claim. They don't bark at the bag, they sit down by
Right,
it.
but then they're also right near the handler.
That's
and
right.
see
But this
them,
is the
so-
thing. You see, this is something where in the video you'd explain. But this dog won't be right near the handler, so the dog barks so you know where it is.
Is there something in general, kind of like how the autistic is attracted to water, that there's an aversion to dogs, or?
No, the thing is that what's scary is dogs move rapidly.
Okay.
They move unpredictably. Also, they're barking, you can't control it. Okay, you can desensitize an autistic kid by having them turn a vacuum cleaner on and off, and the vacuum cleaner will go from the most feared thing to the fun thing to play with. That should have been done with me when I was 5. I was terrified of Mr. Russell's vacuum cleaner, and it had a giant bag this big. I'm sure it was only about this big, but when you're 5, it was really big. And what they should have done is let me play with Mr. Russell's vacuum cleaner and make the bag inflate and deflate. See, the more you can familiarize the kid, but the problem with some kids with dogs, and this is the reason why a service dog for certain individuals is not appropriate, because they can't control when a dog barks. And they tend to do rapid movement, which is scary.
I'm thinking some of this might be for us handlers, if we know that the person might be a little bit more afraid of the dog because of that. Maybe when we're seeing the body language from our dog that we're getting closer.
Then I
maybe
would
we
pull,
hook 'em
maybe
up
rein it in
and-
and you'd walk over there. Might be the thing to do. Because if the dog's straining at the leash and barking, then
Yeah,
it's,
that's gonna be scary for anyone.
that's going to be scary. Because you think it's going to come and bite you. Yeah, but he's barking to tell you where the person's at. Yeah, see, that's your problem.
Dr. Grandin, thank you for being here. My name is John Fan. I'm the sheriff here, and I appreciate you coming and
Well,
sharing.
it's good to
helping
be
us
here.
Keep it safe. So talking about how do we increase our odds of finding the lost children? So we talk about dogs may be scary because they move quickly and they're
But you have
loud.
to find them.
We have to find them.
You have to
What-
find them, that's right.
What about any affinity or any aversion perhaps to like using the posse and horses? That would increase our
It depends
opportunity?
upon whether the kid likes horses. If you
Okay.
had a child that was in a therapy, we have therapeutic riding. So if you had a child that did therapeutic riding, then horse probably wouldn't be scary. Somebody came out riding horses. This is where you've got to know about the kid. If the kid never rode horses, they'd be scary. See, it gets back to what is the previous experience. See, I find this in animal behavior problems. In my book, Animals in Translation, I talk about a horse that was terrified of black cowboy hats. White ones were fine. They tend to be very specific. And if the child had previous experiences with horses that were good, that might be helpful to have the horse out there. For another kid, it might be more scary. See, this is, you got to look at the previous experiences. You know, and then another kid, you know, having their favorite song playing. I don't think you can go wrong on that. Someone just has to tell you what it is.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you, I appreciate it.
That's an easy thing to do.
Dr. Grandin, I've been out of grade school for a long time.
I have too.
Do our local schools offer programs? You mentioned the firefighters.
Well, I think the thing is that schools are not doing enough on teaching life skills. I've talked to parents of teenagers, fully verbal, doing well in school. They've never gone shopping by themselves. They've never ordered in a restaurant by themselves. They don't have a bank account. They aren't learning enough life skills. You know, that yes, academics is important, but life skills are also very important. A lot of parents get locked into the label, and they can't imagine that the kid can do anything. And then an autistic person built the center track restrainer system, had a big metal fabrication shop and 20 patents. And then somebody, you know, now in this generation's playing video games in the basement when they ought to be out building stuff. And it's becoming the label too much. See, and this gets in for me, doing scientific research. Okay, now I do a lot of outreach talks. That's more important to me than being autistic. Autism is an important part of who I am, but I want to see the kids coming in now grow up and be successful. And there are certain, you know, fully verbal autistic people who would be super good at search and rescue. They'd be super good at it. They'd probably be the visual thinkers.
And that brings me to my next question. If we, as search and rescue, are working with professionals who are within our realm, so a fellow search and rescue
Yep.
person or law enforcement who has autism, how should we interact, or what can we expect in that interaction?
Well, one of the things, let's say you have one working for you. Sometimes they need to be coached on just some basic social skills. Like when my very first job, I criticized some welding and I said it looked like pigeon do. And the plant engineer pulled me into his office, and he didn't scream and yell at me, but he explained to me that that was not appropriate talk and I'd have to apologize. He told me what I should do. They sometimes just need coaching. I needed some coaching on hygiene. And there's a scene in the movie where my boss slammed down the deodorant and said, "You stink, use it." And that's something where you might have to have a talk with somebody about that. And you do it in private, but you just explain to them what you should do. You know, you called your colleague a stupid idiot. No, that's not acceptable. You tell them what they should do. And the other thing, controversial subjects, sex, religion, and politics, we don't bring that to work, period. Just period. Leave that stuff at home. Sports, search and rescue techniques, pets, training dogs, those are all things we can talk about at work. And weather. I like to show off my weird storm pictures at the Denver airport.
When you were corrected for your behaviors, how did you take that?
Well, I went and did it. In fact, the engineer pulled me into his office, and he told me that it was really rude, and I'm going to have to apologize to Whitey the welder. Now, I didn't tell him the welding was wonderful, but I apologized for the rude talk. He made me go up to the cafeteria and apologize to him right then and there. The other thing he explained to me is that Whitey the welder was his employee. So if I didn't like the welding on the project, I should have come to him to complain about the quality of the welding, not yakking around the plant saying that it looked like pigeon do. He very precisely and calmly, he didn't chew me out, told me what I should do. And you have to be very direct. You don't hint and say you're not a team player.
And-
That's too vague.
And should this be a one-on-one? Is
Yes,
it over-
yes. This was one-on-one, in private. Even the thing with the deodorant, he slammed it down, but it was in private. It was one-on-one in private.
Thank you.
He also had the secretaries take me out shopping for clothes too. I mean, but it was not done in front of the other employees. Absolutely not.
Doctor, thanks for coming out. A couple of questions. My name's Kevin. I'm one of the sergeants in emergency services here for the sheriff's office. You know, we go on these calls and you'll get parents maybe are separated and you get two stories.
Oh, well,
Like
that's
one
a
says the
problem.
kid is autistic, the other's like, no, you know, that. So you get two different conflicting stories. And so you're trying to, obviously, we don't have a huge amount of time, you know,
Well,
to try
no,
and
no,
decipher
but the
this.
thing
So-
is, if a kid has trouble speaking, that's obviously not normal, if a kid has trouble speaking. But you see, the problem is autism is a true continuous trait. If you're gonna take the whole population of people, half the people are gonna be lean towards more social emotional. You see, and all of the social emotional stuff takes up brain circuits. The other side of the people is gonna be more interested in what they do, sort of more and when does slightly geeky and nerdy become autism? That's debatable. There's no black and white dividing line. Then you get down very severe where they have epilepsy, they've got all kinds of other neurological stuff wrong with them, they don't speak. And then you have somebody, a computer programmer at, for some big tech company. I mean, I can tell usually myself if they're autistic. See, that's where you've just seen enough of them.
And is there any, kind of base questions we should try and ask? Because again, you're gonna get two stories. One side's gonna say, well, no, he or she's
Well, you see, when they're
normal, or-
very mildly autistic, it's debatable.
Right.
You see, the problem is diagnosis is not definitive. There's no lab test. It isn't like tuberculosis or COVID. You've either got it or you don't. It's not. In the real mild cases, it's not definitive. So let's say you have a kid, they used to call that Asperger's, which is socially awkward, no speech delay. And a mild Asperger's, it can be debatable whether you slap the label on it. You see, that's the problem. Now you come in and the kid's obviously nonverbal and it's a communication device. Yeah, that one's definitely autistic. One question you could ask is, do they use a communication device? Because they definitely have got an abnormality if they have to use a communication device.
And then I know we've run into sometimes they'll say they have like the mental capacity of like a 10-year-old, I'll say, just for example. But the person's like 30 years old in reality. So a 10-year-old living another 20, autistic or not, these kids are smart and they're gonna figure stuff out. So do we go
Well,
with
the
like a
thing is,
10-year-old or do
I
we go with
ask can you read? Can you write? Let's just look at some things like that. Could he read the newspaper and I'd give him an article like about the hurricane, cut the pictures off. Article about the latest hurricane, can he tell me about it? Where it was, what it wrecked, just basic stuff like that. Could he read that kind of basic stuff in a newspaper? That's adult level reading.
Thank you.
Skills. Can he dress himself? Take a shower by himself? Can he shop by himself? Okay, those are all things that, but you see, the thing is, you can have an individual who is intellectually really smart, but emotionally much more childlike,
Thank you.
where they may be extremely intellectual, but emotionally childlike. And the stuff that they can get laughing about is the kind of stuff that 10-year-olds think are funny.
So listening to a bunch of this, it seems to me that the really important thing is to get a hold of the caregiver, hopefully a parent, and say, has this person ever been lost before? How do you get them
That's right.
out of the
That's a
closet
really
when
good-
they're hiding, right? And then there could even be a checklist. Are they afraid of dogs? Are they afraid of horses? You could have the search and rescue could have a list.
That's right.
Questions to ask the caregiver.
And
right?
that makes a
'Cause it's-
lot of sense.
Right,
That
because
makes
it's
a lot
probably
of
happened
sense.
before to them, right?
Yeah.
Have they been near water? Is there a risk they're going to jump in the water, et cetera?
Well, that's a really good idea. Okay, I could start maybe making a checklist of things that you could do.
Kind of on a related point, you mentioned before taking certain things out into the field that might attract a kid back to you, like, for example, a plushie toy.
Yeah, and or the music, things good about music is it transmits for distance.
Are there any other items you might recommend for us to
Anything
say, put together a kit?
anything the kid likes. The thing about the music is they can hear it for a distance. It's also real easy to do.
But I mean, are there some things that perhaps are more common that we could pre-pack?
Well, the music, they tend to like children's movies. Disney movies are popular. So you'd have to download the stuff from online, and parents would have to tell you what it is. And the music's easy to do, and it transmits for a distance, where a plush toy doesn't. And most of the stuff the kids like's common stuff that would be on a streaming service.
Thank you.
And then you have to be someplace where you can stream it.
So one of the questions I had is, oftentimes when we find a subject, they may be in a condition like hypothermia
Yeah.
or injured where we need to provide aid to them. So what would be the most appropriate way to do that to not add to that fear
Well, I think
factor?
this is where their favorite plush toy would be a good thing to give them. That's when you give them the plush toy.
Okay.
You got to get them warmed up, or you've got their badly cut. That's when you give them the favorite toy.
Okay. Any recommendations around like touching or anything like that? I mean,
Tickle
know.
touches tend to scare.
okay.
One of the things sometimes that helps is just tell them, well, you have to touch you. You've got a bad cut, and you just, they're fully verbal. We're going to have to put a bandage on it or whatever you have to do.
Okay.
You're cold. We're going to have to put a blanket on you. It's surprises scare.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real basic principle. Surprises scare. So you can say, well, you've gotten cold. We're going to have to put a blanket on you to warm you up, and then give them, hopefully you have their favorite toy. This is the time to give them the favorite toy when you find them.
Awesome. Thank you.
You see, as I talk about these things, I like see it in my mind. Yeah, if they got a bad cut, you're going to have to do something about that right away.
But if we show them,
Give them their favorite toy and say, now you're bleeding. We're going to have to put a bandage on this. It's going to have some pressure. I have to do a talk next week to dentists. And autistic kids are terrified of dentists. Now, this is something where they need to go in and watch other people do it. All right, see how all the tools work. In other words, get the interest factor up there. You see, now this is a situation where you'd have the time to do that. No, you don't just shove them down in the chair and, start sticking needles in them. That's not the thing to do. But that's something where parents need to take the time to let them watch other people do it. How do the tools work? Go on the websites for the tools. One kid is terrified of the dryers in the bathroom. They went to all the websites that made these things, and they started making them interesting. That's something that the parent could do at home. And then the kid gets interested in it, and then you start learning how they work. Has a fan in there that moves the air, and electricity runs that. And
Dr. Grandin, I'm with Dive Rescue, and an important part of recovering a drowning victim is getting as good an idea as possible of the last seen point, where they were last seen.
Yeah.
I can foresee a situation where we might be interviewing, one of the witnesses might be autistic. I recognize that there's a broad spectrum of capabilities. Are there any suggestions for how best to interview that person to try to get
Calmly.
Quietly.
You get in their face.
No.
It's like the computer that you've clicked on it too many times that's tried to open the website 5 times and then it takes forever to open it?
Yeah.
Calmly. That's the thing to do.
Quiet also helpful?
Quietly and calmly, because they freeze if you get too much in their face.
Okay, but they're pretty good at identifying.
Oh yeah, if you talk to them calmly, also give them time to respond.
Okay,
It's like a phone with lousy service. It takes time to download the website. And some of these kids and adults, it might take 30 seconds for them to respond. That's a long time. Now, of course, if somebody's drowning, that you don't want to wait that long, but calmly. And you approach it really calmly, and they'll tell you everything.
that's good. Thank you for the insight.
Yep, that's the thing.
Hi, Dr. Grandin. Could you please comment on the difference in receptive versus expressive ability for a nonverbal
Okay, let's
child?
talk about it. There's 3 ways how the brain can be messed up with language. The first thing is you test their hearing and you find out they're not deaf. Now, a hearing test just tests pure tones. It does not test auditory detail. For example, if I say dog, the child might hear oh. Because if you take the word dog and you put it through sound analyzer, the hard consonants are much quicker than the vowel. So my speech teacher would hold up a cup and go cup, and then she'd go cuppa. She'd say, and enunciate those hard consonant sounds. So this is why you have to speak slowly. That's receptive language. And if grown-ups talk fast, it turns into garble. And then some of the autistic nonverbals only speak in vowel sounds. They're not hearing the hard consonants. Now, I had some receptive problems. The next thing is expressive. I couldn't get my speech out. It was like a stutter. Couldn't get it out. Now, the third thing is the echolalic kid. This is the kid that will just recite a whole Disney movie, but they have absolutely no idea what the speech means. They'll yak out all this speech very clearly, but they don't know the meaning. So what you have to do is train a child to understand the meaning. So you might go through a whole Disney script and try to pick out a few lines where you can integrate it into real conversation. Then they start to understand it has meaning. You start teaching names of toys, names of favorite foods, names of clothing, just simple things like that, because they have to learn that the words have meaning. Because kids that were echolalic have written speech therapy was just meaningless drills. They didn't know that the talk had meaning. So that's your 3 ways. Receptive, expressive, yaks it all out clearly, but doesn't know what it means. That's the 3 ways the brain can be messed up with speech.
So when we hear the term a nonverbal child, that could be referring to their expressive ability, but
Some kids that have, but some kids that are expressive can have good receptive. And some kids can read. I've talked to parents where they went and looked at the cache memory on the internet and found a whole bunch of news stuff that the kid was looking up. And it turned out that he could read. You see, this is why we need to be teaching nonverbals how to type. Now, one of the problems you've got is attention shift. If you take a regular desktop, your keyboard's way down here, and the print appears on the screen up here. And they can't make the attention shift. That's the reason why tablets work, because the print appears next to the virtual keyboard. Laptops are bad too, because the print appears on the top of the monitor, and they can't make this shift. But there's a lot of individuals that are nonverbal, they can learn to type. They kind of have a locked-in syndrome. So that, the thing is the nonverbals are on a spectrum too, from like a locked-in syndrome with a functioning brain in there, to maybe somewhere they won't learn to type. See, there's such a big spectrum, and you're calling so many different things autism is the problem. You see, they used to just put a lot of those kids just into a mental retardation category, but they've gotten rid of that now. And then the other question that comes up is autism increased. I think a lot of it's increased detection, because I have grandparents come up to me all the time, and they discover they're autistic when the kids are diagnosed. And when this adult gets diagnosed later in life, that often helps them with their relationships. You know, because I had a lady come up to me at the Denver airport, and she says, your book, Thinking in Pictures, saved our marriage because now I understand my engineering husband. I think you have to be a little bit autistic to be a really good engineer. See, a brain can either be more social emotional, or a brain can be more interested in, okay, building a building is much more interesting than talking about emotions. I had a great conversation one time on a plane with a lady construction manager, and we had a wonderful 2-hour flight discussing tilt-up warehouse construction and the problems it has falling over when the hurricane takes out the roof trusses, and concrete forming systems for bridges. Now, that was a really fun flight. Concrete construction methods. Okay, you see, that's kind of geeky. I remember that was a great flight.
Thank you. I'm with Larimer County Search and Rescue, not dressed appropriately here.
Okay, all right, okay.
I also do search dogs, and I have,
So you train them?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a very large search dog who barks, and it tends to scare people. So
Yeah.
I've come up with a couple of ways, but I was hoping that maybe you had a better way to desensitize kids for that.
Well, one of the things I suggest, okay, they might want to get a service dog. I can't control dog barking. So the things I can't control, like thunder, dog barking, get a real high quality audio recording that the kid can control. It's got to be high quality, not some crummy little MP3 file where you've clipped all the high frequencies off. And the child controls it, turning it on and off, increasing the volume. You could have thunder on that, you can have dogs barking on that. And again, when you give the child the control of the dreaded sound, they can often get to where they can tolerate it.
How does that associate with the dog if it's a recording?
Well, if a child's heard dogs barking, he'd have to have seen a dog bark and heard it, then he would know. If he had never been around dogs, then he wouldn't know it was dogs.
Okay.
But most children have been around dogs and they've heard and seen the dog's mouth open up, and they know that it's barking. A lot of dogs today are afraid of more stuff, all the thunderstorm phobias. I think one of the big problems we got with a lot of dogs, they're leading too sheltered a life. They're not getting out and doing enough stuff, and they're afraid of more stuff. There's more problems with dogs being afraid of the veterinarian because they haven't gotten used to strange people touching them.
Does it help if the child is able to touch the dog?
Oh yeah, I want to do everything I can to make dogs interesting. Like if you brought a dog into the school, yeah, you let the kids pet it and everything, and you make sure they don't, poke at his eyes or something like that. They've got to pet it nicely, so the dog's going to like it. And you see, you get rid of the surprise, novelty, strangeness factor, and they're not going to be afraid of dogs.
Thank you.
But then on the other hand, there's some dogs they need to stay away from because they would.
Well, I'm a dog handler, so I've got a related question. What if the dog knows the speak command, and you tell the...
Well, if he knows the speak command, that would be a really good way to do it, and then maybe the kid could tell the dog to speak. You see, that gives the kid control. You see, like with the vacuum cleaner and the hairdryer, the child is turning it on. Another kid was afraid of the school bell. He took him down to the principal's office after school, let him ring it 50 times. That helped. Now, of course, the dog, after a while, you're not going to want to do the speak command 50 times. The dog's going to probably not respond too well with that. But you see, the principle is when the child can control the noisy thing that hurts his ears, then they can often get to tolerate it. So, okay, so if a child knows that kids bark, you can do recordings.
Can we get very concrete and have you give us 4 or 5 questions, really specific questions that the initial sheriff's office
All right, let's say you get a call. An autistic
individual
individual is out in the woods. First thing I always ask is age. Are we dealing with under 5, elementary school, teenagers or adults? Then I want to get some idea of functioning level. Can he talk? Can he talk normally? You know, those things I'd want to know. Those would be the two most important things I want to find out. And then I'd want to get some, so age, can he talk? Then the nature of why he might have run away. See, some kids are just runners, they call them elopers. But another kid might run away because there's fighting going on in the family. You know, why does he run off? Has he done it before? What kind of places, when he did it before, did he go? Well, I've talked to people that are hunters, and they know where elk hide, and then they can find them. And then the other thing would be, especially with, you know, nonverbals, favorite songs, favorite toys. Those would probably be the main things I'd be asking. But I got to know age first. Am I dealing with a 5-year-old that's out in the woods somewhere, or? Because I'll have teachers come to me and say, well, how do I teach autistic kids? And I don't know whether I'm dealing with a 3-year-old early intervention or dealing with a high school kid. I don't need to know the exact age, but I just kind of put them like under 5, elementary school, high school, adult. And then level of speech. What's their history of running away? And then favorite music, favorite things. But I'm amazed at the amount of teachers that don't ask me the age.
Doctor, you were talking about the sound, like of music. So some of the drones we have in the sheriff's office can have a speaker that can project.
Well, if that could work.
The drone itself, I know that it might, you were talking about if they're not used to it, but like flying above them and playing some sort of music.
What I've found with livestock with drones, if you park a drone up in the air and it kind of hovers and moves slowly, that doesn't scare. But we had a very stupid thing happen at our equine center with a news crew. And myself and Adam Dario got on 2 horses, and a news photographer took a drone and came in like a plane coming in for landing right at us. That couldn't have been more dangerous. We were very lucky we weren't bucked off. That was incredibly stupid. But if you put a drone up in the air, did this with cattle one time, and you just lower it straight down, they just look at it. But if it swoops across them, then it's scary. So if you use a drone, kind of keep it high, hovering and moving slowly. They're less likely to react to it than if it swoops down like a hawk attacking.
So I had a follow-up question to their favorite things. So when we search, we're oftentimes broken into, 6 to 12 teams, and so we can't all carry their favorite thing with us.
Well, the music you can carry, though.
Yes.
That's the thing that everybody can have that. That's one of the reasons why, that's the easy one to do, too.
Yeah. Would talking about, if we knew what their favorite topics were, their favorite things were, what things they were interested in, would talking with them about that help put them at ease? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Favorite things, okay. Likes Mustang sports cars or whatever. Okay. Another individual loved mountain bikes. Okay. Those would be examples of favorite things. Yes. Talking about favorite things would help to calm them down. Yeah, there's the thing I always recommend to parents. I said, if your kid loves cars, let's broaden it. Let's take that fixation on cars to teach reading, teach math, learn some physics, how engines work in cars. Take that and broaden it. When I was a little kid, I would just draw the same horse head over and over again. And Mother goes, well, let's draw the whole horse. Let's draw the stable. Let's work with different media like watercolors rather than just pencil. Taking that fixation and broadening it because fixations can become careers. So I'll get an older nonverbal individual and they love sports cars or something like that. And you got somebody on the crew that's likes cars. Yeah, that definitely would put them at ease, talking about favorite things. And that's an easy thing to find out from people.
Are there any other questions? Allison, do we have anything online?
Oh, got some people online?
No questions online, but we could ask them. Do you guys have any questions online?
Well, I hope I've given you some insights into kind of how to deal with a mind that's different. And we've talked about a lot of good things and things that you could actually do easily. I'm always very big on practical, doing stuff that's practical.
Well, Dr. Grandin, it's 8 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Well, it was great to be here. I'll tell you, favorite thing for a lot of people on the spectrum, Star Trek. The Star Trek fan. A lot of them love science fiction, so talk to them about Star Trek or Star Wars or something like that.